Welcome to our discussion on a very, very important subject, education diplomacy in a fractured world. Now, of course, this discussion could not come at a more critical time. We see isolationism growing around the world, mobility more difficult, and of course, profound geopolitical uncertainty. Educational educational ties are, of course, critical diplomatic tools which can counteract those forces, but they are being complicated. Now, there are new models that we are seeing around the world, specifically here in Qatar, here in Doha. We see what the Qatar Foundation is doing with Education City. And today's panel is not just an isolated conversation, it's part of an ongoing conversation about the evolution of the global higher education landscape. This was a theme, in fact, that was explored at the WISE Summit, which took place just last month here in Doha. So today, we're going to continue that conversation. We're going to discuss all of this with an exceptional lineup of experts and leaders in this field. So I'd like us all to welcome Her Excellency Sheikha Dr. Hessa bint Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. She is the chairperson and founder of the Wellbeing and Career Development Training Center. Welcome, Your Excellency. Next is Dr. Fanta, who is the executive director and CEO of NAFSA, the Association of International Educators. Welcome, Doctor. At the end, Dr. Hilligje van Blant, the Secretary General of the International Association of Universities. And last but not least, Dr. Francisco Marmolejo, who is the President of Higher Education here in Doha at the Qatar Foundation. And I am Marquardt. I'm your moderator and a foreign policy and national security journalist. So we have a lot to get to, and I want to ask each of you the same question to begin with. And I should note that we will try to keep some time at the end for some questions. I'm sure you all have some smart and pertinent questions. But if I may start with the same question for each of you, and Your Excellency, we're gonna start with you. Education diplomacy broadly, why do you feel it is so important, especially today, given everything that I just mentioned, this heightened political turmoil, the impact that we are seeing on the mobility of academics and of students globally? I think it's on.
It's on? Yes. I normally start with, I am a teacher, my voice should be clear and loud. So, we all, as teachers, as educators, we go with the concept, like what education and diplomacy. And we know, like the jargon of diplomacy, when it comes to, it's a political, nice word to say, how they want to get things done. But for us educators, what is education? Us humans are wired naturally in our design to be seekers of knowledge wherever we are. And with that, if I can get into this metaphor, migrant birds, we all know of the migrant birds, flying from one continent to another, guided with their compasses, landing in a nice farm. Maybe the farmer is generous enough to harvest and to plant seeds enough for everyone to share, and they travel. Some decide to stay, some travel, and then in the hope that we welcome them again back to this ecosystem. So they help us and they help others. So you get where I'm going with this. Students, teachers, scholars are like those migrant birds. They come, they learn, we develop some capacity building in them. Some would like to stay longer. How much can they stay longer? And some will go. And then in the hope that this will be a continuous seeking of knowledge cycle wherever we go. And this is how I see, education with those three actors: teachers, students, and this ecosystem of curriculum that encompasses our bigger values. And for us policymakers, we need to identify what are those indicators, what are those holistic indicators that we can measure successful educational diplomacy. Beyond politics, what are those indicators that measures how successful we are to encompass all types of learners, to encompass knowledge, because knowledge should not be fragmented, should be treated as its own distinctive authority.
I love the analogy of migration, or the metaphor rather. Dr. Marmolejo, same question to you, the importance of education diplomacy, particularly in this day and age.
We have to share the mic. Thank you very much, Alex. And I think I will add to the analogy that I was used here by saying that in today's world, unfortunately, there are many voices in society claiming that that place where that process can happen no longer is a kind of an authority only of the educational institutions. That can happen any place. And in fact, that sometimes educational institutions are useless, no longer needed for today's and tomorrow's challenges. And I would like to challenge precisely that assumption, because at the end of the day, educational ecosystems are the ones that may prepare the type of individuals that are needed to address the complexities of today's and tomorrow's problems that the world is and will be facing. So this has proven to be a formula for the past. We have seen that in the case of Qatar. You know, in the last 30 years, Qatar Foundation has established what I truly believe that is the most comprehensive education, innovation, and disruption ecosystem in the world by bringing together a variety of educational institutions, community engagement entities, and research entities under the same tent, with the whole very simple idea that today is very valid, which is the idea that unlocking the human potential is a right of every individual in the world, and that we need to work towards that. And we truly believe, and we have seen that again and again and again, that when a student is exposed not only to the best possible education, but in addition to that, that is made conscious about the role that he or she will face or will have as a good citizen of the world, we know that that seed eventually will result in a very individual, and for that matter, in a better society. So that's why I truly believe that even in times like today, in which we tend to be depressed about what we see around, we still should believing that at the end of the day, education is the best tool that we can use to address those challenges and to dream and to work towards a better world.
Dr. Van... Dr. Van Laan, how do you see it?
I couldn't agree more. I don't know if this is working.
Is her microphone on?
Is the microphone? Yes, it now is working. First, I would like to say that I'm extremely pleased to see that there is a session on education at the Doha Forum, in a forum that has been, for me until now, since yesterday morning, extremely educational in a way, because it allowed to also see that we have the opportunity to connect different sectors and work together, and that it is so incredibly needed. So I'm very pleased to see that we have a full house, that we, yesterday also in the sessions on culture, the rooms were full. And so it's very important to see that education, exactly for the reasons that both of you, Dr. Hessa and Dr. Marmolejo, put to the room, the importance of education today. We saw many problems, many challenges that the world is facing, and the agendas that we see around the world are multiplying: the SDG Agenda 2030, the Pact for the Future, the conference on fundraising where these issues were addressed, or the World Social Summit. Everywhere we talk about the challenges that we face, but then how to address them and how to do it better than through education, but not just any kind of education, but through quality education. And we tend to forget that one of the sequences, in one of the most important keys in the sequencing of education from pre-primary all the way through to lifelong learning, higher education is often forgotten. It's seen as something out there that we don't need to take care of, but we do. And higher education has this unique opportunity to build these bridges between continents, between countries, between peoples, between knowledge systems. And we do not pay attention enough to those opportunities. And at the same time, higher education itself is doing it. It's building these bridges despite the fact that countries are building new big brick walls against knowledge cooperation, against knowledge sharing. And it's not only the countries that do that, but also the continents. And we need to see how universities today are, despite all these new walls, developing incredible opportunities for cooperation through teaching and learning, through research opportunities, through community engagement with the opportunities they have to be anchored and both locally, nationally, regionally, and internationally. So these are real opportunities. That's where the importance of education diplomacy comes in. Academic diplomacy, scientific diplomacy are building blocks of the future that we have to really count in as the key elements that will help get us out of the complex situations in which we are around the world. We've seen it in many reports that have been launched here as well, that we need diplomacy, we need dialogue, we need nuance, we need understanding, we need to deconstruct stereotypical views of the world, and that's higher education right there. We need to have an opportunity together to pave the way to a more just world, a more inclusive one where we value diversity and ensure that we connect through very high-level intellectual opportunities that will allow to unpack the challenges that we face. And that's where I would like to go back just quickly to your point, Francisco, where there is potential in each and every one of us, and we need to ensure that access to education and higher education is for the many and for everyone, so that we can together develop these new birds and opportunities for connecting the different nations through education.
Dr. Off, if you wouldn't mind answering the same question, but also in light of the moment, how you see things, how important the priority of educational diplomacy is in this moment.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I don't think we can state enough how critical it is, how critical education is. It is often the case that in a fractured world, education is often the first bridge that we may lose. And yet it is the one that is the hardest to rebuild. And reconstruction becomes one of the challenges that we confront. So it is absolutely in the public interest that we do everything we can to preserve our institutions of higher education. And there is no doubt that there are more threats to higher education today than we've seen in recent times. And those threats are real. The threats to academic freedom, the threats to a learning environment, the threats to access to education around the world are absolutely tangible and they're real. And so for me, when I think of this work, I think of it not so much as soft power, but as in fact smart power. And I think we cannot underestimate the importance of that. It is also the case that we need to think of education diplomacy as knowledge diplomacy. One that knows no border, and one where there is not a single entity that owns or has the privilege of knowledge over any other. So the plurality of knowledge, I think, is something that we don't often talk about, and that yet it is absolutely necessary. And one of the reasons I'm glad we're having this conversation here at the Doha Forum is that it gives us an opportunity to decenter a little bit, perhaps, Western ways of knowing and being. And the understanding and the recognition that knowledge comes from so many other parts of society, and no one owns that knowledge, no one should have the privilege of that singular knowledge, is one of the things that I think we need to recognize and we need to really do a better job of. It is also the case that the reason why today it's even more important is because we have to continue to think of this educational and knowledge diplomacy as a global public good. And it is one that is being threatened by ideological polarization, as we've seen. And yet, at a time when we need to be thinking about peace building, when we need to be thinking about human development, when we need to think about human flourishing, I cannot think of a path to human flourishing, to development and peace building without going through education. It is the true way, from what I see, to many of the conversations we've been having around geopolitics, around economic restabilization and so forth. How do we do that without involving higher education in particular? Because many of these issues are issues that higher education prepares students that are, in fact, the next generation of leaders who will be sitting here, who will be problem solving around these public diplomacy issues. We're the one who are training them for tomorrow. And that is a huge responsibility that institutions have, and a responsibility that they have to take very, very seriously. So yes, we have a major task in front of us, but we also have to recognize that higher education has its own challenges. And we do need to work on the challenges that we confront, and it's not perfect. However, what is the alternative? That's my question. What is the alternative to higher education? I don't know of one that better prepares for the kind of world that we're in, and for the world that we want the next generation to be prepared for as we move forward.
You've all articulated so well why this is so important, so critical, particularly now. I want to drill down a bit more on what is being done, what still needs to be done. And by all means, let's make this a conversation. If you'd like to jump in on what someone else is saying, just grab the mic. But Dr. Van Laan, let me go back to you. You just mentioned brick walls a moment ago, and it does seem that some of those walls are getting sturdier and higher. How are you seeing universities and international organizations adjusting to navigate these political pressures? How are they doing that? What more do they need to be doing?
Indeed, there is something that's happening in the world that is actually very discomforting even, and concerning. And that is this new move towards assessing risks. Everything is about security, risks, about trying to ensure that we will protect ourselves from the others. And you see that in higher education as well, where there are new agendas coming up, in particular one that is called responsible internationalization, where I saw a great opportunity. Let's be responsible when we engage internationally with other countries, other universities, other knowledge systems, and let's make sure that we are true about South-South cooperation, about looking at knowledge systems from other parts of the world in a positive light. No, responsible internationalization, as it is being defined today, is to look at who are trusted partners, who can we work with, who can we not work with, according to what definitions, and nobody has a clue about what security in research means, apart that everybody has the same word in mind, and dual use of research outputs, etc. Everything could be dual use. Use the microphone and throw it at somebody, it becomes a weapon. So it's very complicated. I don't want to minimalize the issues at stake, but there is something that is going in the wrong direction. We really tend to move towards opposing countries again, even through research and education. So what do associations like the Global Association of Universities that I represent, which celebrates 75 years of international cooperation just this year? It's been called into life by UNESCO back in 1950. And we signed the Constitution on 9 December, so this week, but 75 years ago, to really defeat all these different dynamics, and on the contrary, to build peace in the minds of people through higher education by better connecting us. And so associations, what they do is offer safe spaces for dialogue. A bit like the Doha Forum, in a way, is doing, is really bringing different voices to the table and ensure that those who may be outside would have less opportunities to discuss, to connect, to bring them together. And associations of universities, is it NAFSA or is it the IAU or is it the Arab Association of Universities, the African Association of Universities, the European Association? We put on the agenda these very important discussions around the values. You talked about university autonomy, academic freedom. There are others, the importance of diversity, of inclusion, of working together and collaboration rather than competition. So that's how we really engage much more strategically today, because that's also something Hillary Clinton said it in a previous session just before lunch. She said, everybody believes that we know what the value of higher education is. We've lost that to a certain extent, and we need to reaffirm the understanding of the power of higher education for individuals and for society, and it can go through associations that will then network the institutions from across the world and help define new ways together.
There is so much to unlock here. If you allow
Please jump in.
Please. All of these like values-driven that was said here and said in the beginning speeches about knowledge. In our heritage, here in the Qatari heritage, we say, al-ilmu sultan, knowledge is sultan. You have to treat it with its own respect and authority. And the more you give to knowledge, the more it will give you back. The opposite for money. The more you spend, the more it will decrease. But with knowledge, it is the reciprocity of that knowledge. The more you give, the more it will give you. You know? So this gets us to the second point that you were mentioning about trust and building trust. What is the enemy of trust is ignorance. You know, we are ignorance is our enemy. And there is like so much uncertainties happening to us in higher education and education across the spectrum because of the new challenges that is happening to us. For me as a teacher, I can tell you about the conflicting values that I have to deal with every day that my students are dealing with the AI. How much should I trust? How much should I, keep them from it? We are still learning. But I believe to reduce this ambiguity, policymakers respect numbers. They need to see measurements. They need to see, is it not working?
No, keep going.
They need, numbers by the end matters. How authentic is our measurement? How holistic is our measurement? How much those measurements are truly evaluating the success of a story or success of a program? We need to go back to our essence. What are we measuring? How transparent we are in measurement. And another value that was mentioned yesterday, big time, across all spectrum, justice. Everybody's calling for justice. Why? It's the equalizer for all of our human cardinals. And it is internal harmony of us as humans, as well as an ecosystem harmonizing us, toward this one humanity. And I would like
Yeah, no, I would like to add something, because I think it is important as part of this conversation. And it was being mentioned a little bit about here, because I think all of us believe that education is very important, that higher education is very important, because I'm sure that 99% of the people here have the privilege of having access to higher education. So our big challenge is not to convince ourselves about the importance of this, but to convince the rest of society about it. Because still, there are many, many in the world who didn't have the same privilege as we had. Even when we talk about education diplomacy, the most typical tool of education diplomacy is international students, right? A student who has the opportunity to go from one country to another country. Here, for instance, at Qatar, we are extremely proud of the fact that about 50% of students that we have in our higher education ecosystem at Qatar Foundation are international students. This is great, but it's not enough. Why? Well, think about this. There are in the world about 6 million international students. They represent about, I might say, 3% of the total enrollment in higher education globally, which means that about 97% of those students will not have the privilege of the opportunity of experience educational diplomacy on a day-to-day basis, as it happens with the 50% of the students that we have in our universities in Qatar Foundation. Many of them, by the way, in Georgetown University, which is your alma mater. And I see that the Dean of Georgetown University Qatar is here. And also many graduates of Georgetown University Qatar are here as well. So I think our challenge is how do we make sure that the benefit of this idea about learning the capacity to have otherness, learning the capacity to see the reality of others with our own lenses, is made available to as many students as possible. And secondly, how do we make sure that more students, more youth in the world have the opportunity of education and higher education? Unless we address those challenges, and unless we put the house in order, I might say, in higher education globally, our impact still will be relatively marginal. And then we are going to be relatively marginalized from those geopolitical top-level discussions that happen in the world. So our challenge is to convince ourselves, which I believe we are, but more important, to convince others about it.
Dr. Ah, I want to come back to you, but Dr. Marmolejo, before I let you go, address that specifically, those challenges that the community is facing globally. How are you specifically at the Doha Foundation confronting them? Because universities have historically been a refuge, but also a very resilient infrastructure, if you will. What are you doing to confront those challenges you just mentioned?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, so I can speak for another 30 minutes about that. No, for the ones who don't know, Qatar Foundation is a very interesting, very unique ecosystem. Again, as I don't see comparison in any other place on earth. We have, first of all, the entire educational pipeline, which means that we at higher education cannot blame the previous levels of education, as all universities in the world do, about how badly are prepared the students coming to the universities, right? Here we don't have that luxury because we have the schools from kindergarten up to doctoral education. Then we have the largest concentration of American and then French universities in one single place outside of the United States. So again, educational diplomacy in action, because we are having the opportunity of having a liberal arts education model in a context that recognizes also the values, the culture, the traditions, and the history of a place such as Qatar, which is, by the way, for the ones who have not seen that, one of the most cosmopolitan societies in the world, because here you can find people from all angles of life, countries, religions, languages, living together in a peaceful place. So what a great, very unique laboratory for that to happen, such as Education City, where you have students from 120 different countries, studying in 60 different academic programs, having the opportunity to take courses from any of the other universities that are part of this very unique ecosystem. So that's what we can do here, preparing those students not only with the best education, but more important, with the best attitude and values towards becoming that individual that is going to change society for better, wherever they are going to be tomorrow. Today we have graduates in more than 110 countries as well. We just recently had a meeting of the chapter in the US, Canada, as well as we have a chapter in the UK and many places on earth. So we believe, truly believe, that those students who benefited from education in Education City at Qatar Foundation today are great ambassadors of those good ideas, whatever place they are. But beyond that, and I'm sorry, I will finish with this, as part of this umbrella of Qatar Foundation, there are a number of different organizations, more than 50 organizations. One of them, for instance, is Education Above All Foundation. And I just was taking the numbers here. 14.5 million out-of-school children which are benefiting from EAA work. More than 3.3 million students in the world, especially youth, which are being helped with skills development. And then more 10,000 scholarships being provided to students in areas of distress in order for them to benefit from higher education. This is just one of the examples of the many other actions that in a place, in a laboratory of social innovation, such as Qatar Foundation, it is happening on a day-to-day basis. And I can continue speaking about that, but I know that my colleagues would like to add more to
Let's give the floor to Dr. Oh. I know you would like to chime in, and I just would ask you also to expand on what you mentioned a moment ago about the access to education, but also perhaps the reluctance of students to study in more polarized countries.
No, thank you for that. I think we've tried to unpack so many both challenges but opportunities, right? Because what you've heard us talk about are, here are the challenges that we recognize, but what do we do about them? And I think the opportunity part is an important part of it. And there were a couple of things that my colleagues talked about that I think is quite relevant to lift up. One is really, we do need to continue to provide evidence-based advocacy for higher education. We have to do that work, and there's enough good work that's been happening across the board, but we need to figure out how we tell our stories better. And sometimes we may not be the best ones to tell our stories. It needs to be those who are, in many ways, the beneficiary of our educational systems, who in many ways needs to be out there advocating for the purpose and the mission of higher education. So I think that's one piece in particular that we need to think about. The other part that comes up for me is the duty of care. What is our duty of care in higher education? And this duty of care is particularly important when we think about what my colleagues talked about, which is only 6 million may be benefiting from international higher ed, and yet what does it mean for the 97%? But there's another reality, is that the 97% that we're talking about, there are many of those who are displaced youth, refugee youth around the world. And one of the biggest crises that we must contend with, that will be ongoing crisis, will be refugees. And the lost opportunity that comes from youth not being able to access to education is not a loss to those youth only. It's not a loss to their community. It's a loss to society as a whole. We as a society cannot look the other way when we look at the refugee crisis and the youth refugees. And that, I think, is a call for action, particularly for all of us. And some are doing a better job at this. And interesting enough, it's the countries who have the least resources, by the way, that are contributing the most to helping with the refugees, and the countries that have the most resources, and I'll put Qatar aside, because you're more of an exception and an outlier in that are providing the least. So there's another component to what my colleague talked about, which is, where is the social justice in this area of work? And what does that look like, I think, is an important component of it. And so from where I sit, and from where we are, what is part of the answer? I think part of the answer is more and more countries have come to understand, as we've talked about here, that they do need multilateral partnerships. They cannot depend on bilateral partnerships alone to really make things happen. They need multilateral partnerships to make things happen. But ultimately, at the end of the day, for the work that we're doing, I'm always reminded of this, because coming from the US, where we're facing a stark reality when it comes to higher education, and talk about higher education under threat, it is not understated that it is a threat. But I'm reminded that the best thing we can do is stay focused on the people-to-people exchanges and people-to-people connection, because it will outlast the political cycle. And we must outlast the political cycle.
You could not have set up my next question better. What you said about loss is so important. And Dr. Van Laan, I want to pivot to you. I also saw you nodding along about that point about the US at the end. I was speaking to a young student on the Georgetown campus here just a few days ago who wants to go study on the main campus in Washington, D.C., and she doesn't know if she'll be able to, because she doesn't know if she'll be able to get the visas. They've cut back on the visas. So universities in the US are under threat. Visas are being cut. How much, Dr. Van Laan, do you feel the US is now losing ground because of this politicization, because of the political moves that they're making? How much will students also miss out as a result?
Well, the US is a particular case, to put it mildly. I think the US is going to lose it all. I mean, you close your doors to innovation, you close your doors to open opportunities to connect knowledge system, to bring in people who will look at the things that you do with a a critical lens that will allow to really move towards a better society altogether. We know that from history, for centuries, people have always moved around the world. If you don't, then where do we go? There's attrition, we just dry out. So the US is going to lose out, definitely. Students will think 3 times, 10 times before moving to the US, because it may be very costly. What kind of an education do you get? Now, with everything that's happening and circulating also in the news and what you can read about the US, are you ensured that you can stay once you're there? Are you not at risk of being expelled, even if you've had the opportunity to get a visa? So it's very complicated for students to make that very difficult decision to move to their dreamt of land, because for many, the US was the country to go for very high quality higher education, and probably still would be if the situation would improve. So other continents are thriving thanks to that. I think people will move around the US, go to Canada, they will go to South America. They will maybe finally see that there are many beautiful opportunities in South America. There was a great series of panels this morning again about this opening up of the Latin American continent with the opportunities there are. We've not always looked at these opportunities, but maybe students will. And then Europe is attracting enormous numbers of students. Also with the new dynamics around the Bologna process, the European higher education area, the opening up even of European diplomas, which may be very interesting for students to get. Instead of having a French one, you would have a European diploma soon. And there are many opportunities in Africa where you can go to. So it's kind of redistributing the cards. There is a real opening up. But we need to also train and educate everyone inside the institution on these new opportunities. And it's to be hoped that students will not shy away from where they see potential risk of XYZ, not getting return on investment, etc. It's also the journey of traveling somewhere that is so important, much more important than looking specifically at, well, we cannot go there because we will not get our diploma in 3 months, 6 months, a year. No, it's the whole journey that you were talking about in the beginning that is key to connecting us and to continue to have that opportunity. So we need to train and educate the educators, the admin staff. We need to talk to the students. We need to have this dialogue continuously. And we need to even educate the parents. So that they understand better.
Disruption is part of human experience. You know, what we call it in Arabic, the ibtila, you know. And it's how to use this disruption to be an opportunity for growth. And I am a firm believer that us educators, in order for us to truly, truly convince policymakers, we have to measure everything. We have to authentically, holistically measure everything. I mean, many of us came from different generations of disruption. For me, 9/11 happened in my first week of freshman year. And I was in New York, but I was even remotely upstate New York. So I do understand what disruption is. It's painful what we are experiencing now because we are seeing everything, you know, visually and connected to all of the pains. But if we go back to numbers and see those numbers as humans' feelings, human spirituality, human intellectualism, human as stewards on earth, and start measuring things, start measuring how can we create to unleash the potential, you know, and Qatar is with all of the resources and everything, we are also uniquely adding a flavor to the students who are coming and experiencing being in Qatar. You see sometimes, often some girls who are not Muslim, non-Arabs, wearing abaya, for example, like a very traditional, you know, Arabic, Qatari clothes. They are feeling the society, you know, there is like that authenticity, and this is what we need to continually doing. Back again to measuring, you know, holistic. I would encourage you, if you did not have the chance, to go and check our booth of Al-Hayat Al-Tayyiba, which is well-being. You know, it's like the big global understanding that we are all one universal cell. whether we like it, we come all from same components. You know, we are given spirituality, we are given a heart to feel, you know, a mind to think, a body to act, and a society to build. And this is what we stand for, and this is what we need to measure. And the policymakers, when they see that we are unleashing people's potential and we are no longer measuring the country's success with gross domestic production, and we are going beyond what makes us really unique contributor to the society, that's when money will start, you know, adding to us, research, alignment, and we have to keep those hearts, you know, like migrant birds, again, with those like guiding a compass toward this northern star for us to all thrive. And thank you.
We have just about 5 minutes left, and we have a wonderful, interested, passionate audience, and I'd like to offer you a chance to ask some questions of our panelists. This gentleman here in the aisle, if we could get a microphone to him.
And maybe we can take 2 questions at a time.
I don't know if we actually have any, but sir, if you want to, oh, there we go. Okay. And you can address your question.
Yes, Your Excellency Sheikha Al-Thani, distinguished professors, dear moderator. I am also a student, as well as you were speaking today about this wonderful community of students, academia, and other actors. I am national delegate of Moldova, as well as inventor, founder, and developer of blockchain economic model related to sound money and asset-backed money as well, like relying on maintenance of it and direct investments. My question concerns the issue, as it was mentioned today, like in this age of AI risks, how would it be possible to consider the blending of traditional culture and new technologies, especially as we may mention it here in Qatar, which proceeds very wise and which community is really open to any motivated people, as also the Qatar Foundation may be described by this concept as ample the knowledge, share the competence, as I think it suits here. So how this system of trust and culture plus technology unity can be established, as well as the recombination of values, I would mind to say it's as like duty of care, like Dr. O mentioned, or Dr. Van Slens, yes, also spoken today about the access of education and smart power, how this could be formed. Thank you very much.
Who are you directing your question towards?
I would mind, yes, to Her Excellency Sheikha Al-Thani.
Technology and traditions and all of those conflicting values is something that we have to also, again, you know, I'm sorry I'm repeating measurements as I'm coming, like, you know, like, and my background is not even far away from statistics, but I believe that we have to really see things, and in order for us to be guided with. We are not yet, like, you know, this uncertainties. Why are we talking about justice and peace and all of, because there is so much that inside of us we are fearing because we don't know. What we are seeing, the tip of the iceberg, I am also investing myself as a counseling, in counseling psychology. And what I'm seeing, loneliness is growing, not at the normal lifespan of the humans, you know, with when you're getting older. It's growing more and more among the youth. So why are the youth lonely? This gets us again to the ecosystem. It's beyond us educators alone to be fighting the fight, right? It has to be economic indicators helping with parents, health indicators helping with parents, in order for us to reach to the root causes of the problems, and for us to start really, really deviating from any economic policies that is encouraging material, like, you know, bad materialism, or what we are dealing in our culture that is, I don't know from where it was imported, because I don't want to be blaming any society, individualism. You know, we are collective society. You know, we are people like who we encourage eating together. We are encouraging, you know, the feelings together, etc. So it's a big question, and it's all for us to be thinking globally and holistically to measure what it is that the well-being is there for us to provide. And thank you.
We have time for one quick question. Sir, yes, right there. If you wouldn't mind just keeping it tight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for this session. So I actually felt it inside of me, speaking of immigrant birds, because I originally studied high school in Yemen, and then I got a scholarship to study in Beirut, and now I'm doing my master's in Doha. So speaking of that, I'd like to ask very brief two questions. The first one is about what's the future of classrooms in terms of AI, and are you going to think of flipped classrooms in the future, and what's the future of classrooms in brief? Second, I'd like to talk about what Sheikha Hessa talked about measurement. So we always talk about return on investment, but nobody's talking about social return on investment, which is something that I'm recently researching. And what do you think is the right framework to use to actually measure what's the social return of investments out of the educational institutions in any country? So thank you.
We might only have time for part of that, but Dr. Marmolejo.
Just very quickly. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, just very quickly. I think, what is the question about the future of classrooms? I think it is a fundamental question in terms of what is the future of universities. And, Peter Drucker many years ago said that universities will disappear. Well, they didn't disappear. In fact, when I was working before at the World Bank in India, I remember this number, about 6.3 new higher education institutions being built per day, including Saturdays and Sundays. So universities will not disappear, but for sure we'll have to transform in order to address the new realities and the new means of education. Yes. No longer we can claim that the only place that a student can learn is in the classroom. We need to be completely open to understand that it is much more than that. However, and I follow what Sheikha Hessa had said, we need to build evidence. We can claim that we do wonderful in higher education and that we do great educational diplomacy, for instance. But if we don't have the evidence, we are just making beautiful noise about that, but nothing happens. We need to know if a good citizen, a good individual, family member, a good member of the society, a good professional, is because the education that he or she received, despite the education that he or she received, or even independently of the education that he or she received. And unless we are very serious about analyzing that and recognizing the mistakes and the shortcomings that we have, we won't be able to advance in making sure that education is more relevant, more impactful, and more transformational. And I think that those are the things that we need to think about. Economic returns on education is a good way to measure, of course, but it's not enough. We know that people with education are individuals who have more tolerance, more understanding of the other's perspectives, have healthier lives, have an understanding of points of view of others, are more engaged in the society. We know those formulas. What we need to make sure is that we are as effective as we should, and secondly, that at the end of the day, we should recognize that education is the best investment that a society can do for a better future.
It's a wonderful 10 seconds.
So I would be remiss if I did not say that we cannot think of this as a zero-sum game. It is not a zero-sum game. And one of the things in particular that I'm reminded of with the situation currently in the US is the value of brain circulation. The fact that we may be in challenging time right now, the reality is that there's been generations of students from around the world who've benefited from that education, have brought it back to their home countries, and have made it culturally relevant to what they need within their own system. And if nothing else, that's been at least one of the benefit of this circular sort of motion of education that we're seeing around the world. And I think that is something we should not forget. It is not a zero-sum game.
Wonderful notes to lead this discussion on. Very, very interesting. It's clear there have been monumental successes and that there are huge challenges that are still to be faced. So thank you so much to our panelists, to our audience, and to the Doha Forum for convening this discussion. Thank you.